This did a little fun intro. Look at that. That's a pretty logo we got there. All right. Sorry about that, guys. The technical difficulties were kicking me in the butt tonight, but we're gonna get this thing going. I'm excited to be back. Excited we have some fun new branding, thanks to our man Rick. So we're gonna get this thing going right. We're gonna start, seeing as it's stick scouting combine weekend. We're gonna start talking rookies, and in doing that, we have our resident rookie guru Colin with us, the man that knows all things rookies. So
I,
Colin, thanks for joining me.
I like to think so. Yeah, I like to think so. That's the best way to put it.
You know what? Fake it till you make it, brother. That's what matters.
Exactly. Hey, we all
So,
got strong opinions.
oh yeah, that's why we do fantasy football, right?
Exactly.
So we're going to talk rookies tonight. I don't necessarily have a specific order. I want to talk about some of the guys that you've been excited about, some of the guys that we may not be thinking about in the community. Um, but I want to try to take it, just talk a little bit quarterback, talk running back, talk wide receiver, talk tight end. I mean, they've all got some people that are interesting. So let's hit on a little bit of them. And I won't waste your
Absolutely.
time. I want you to start talking. I want to hear about your quarterbacks, the guys that you're excited about.
Hmm. Beautiful. So, for me, I think now with what we actually found out today with Kyler Murray, he's officially listed as 5'10" and 1/8. And I know a lot of people are saying that's still really short, and it is. That official 5'10" measurement is key for him. If he came in at 5'9" and 7/8 or whatever, even that 1/8 of an inch is going to get him probably in a top five position now. Whether we agree with that or not, he's now we officially have it. He's less than or exactly half an inch shorter than Russell Wilson. So it's not that he's going to be at an unprecedented height. It's a big deal. His hand measurements, I believe, were 9 inches, 9.5 inches, basically, which is about the same size as guys like Matt Ryan, Sam Bradford, RG3, Lamar Jackson. Now, that might not be the greatest, group to be in, with the exception of Matt Ryan right now, but there are starting quarterbacks that have had those measurements, and his height no longer is as big of an issue as it was. It's still going to be an issue, but it's not going to be the driving force behind this player. He has been my quarterback one as long as we knew that he was going to actually be dedicated to the sport, which for a long time none of us knew. He's officially declared he's going into the NFL, and we do know now for a fact that he has a decent height to him. He is shorter, obviously. He's going to be the shortest quarterback in the NFL, but it's not by as significant of a range as or initially we thought.
So in your mind, is he, now you said he's your top quarterback? Is that across
Yeah,
the board? Is it just super flex? I mean, what are you thinking
that
when it comes
is
to standard
across the board.
across the board?
No, yep. At this point, now he's with the official measurements that we got in. I was afraid of his hand measurements. I thought he was going to come in at like 5'9.5", which was going to be an issue with about like 9 inch hands. The hands are a little bit bigger. He's a little bit taller. He measured in at 207 pounds, which is surprisingly a little bit heavier than I expected, which is also a good sign. Um, this is the weakest quarterback class since 2013. He's the guy. I like Drew Lock. Don't get me wrong, but he needs to sit for a year. If you need a guy to come in and be able to at least keep you competitive year one, I think Kyler Murray is really the only quarterback in this class that's going to give you a chance.
Well, and the tough thing is that in the modern day NFL, the way that the money goes around, your quarterbacks, you can start them early, and it's kind of a sink or swim scenario. And I don't know in this class, outside of him and maybe Dwayne Haskins, are they guys that you could put on the field and look like they know what they're doing? But even Haskins is a reach for me because he's got the size. I just don't know that he has it upstairs. I mean, the mental side of it is where I'm nervous with him. What do you think about a
Yeah,
guy like Haskins?
I am not a Haskins fan. I'm not a Haskins. I don't hate him. I think he's a third round prospect to me. Because of the drive in quarterback, a third round player should be taken towards the end of the first round. The fact that he's getting these top 10 comparisons, that scares me. If I'm a Giants fan and I keep seeing these mock drafts like, oh, the Giants are going to take him, like, I'm sorry, but I would rather, take a guy who's a better edge rusher. Even I would rather have, Cleveland Farrell and then have Lauletta for a year. I know that they don't want to waste all this Giants talent, But with next year, we have 3 quarterbacks next year that are far and away better than any of the guys this year. I'm not a big Justin Herbert fan, but Herbert is better than Kyler Murray to me exponentially. Like there's no doubt between the two. And then Fromm is my favorite quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck.
Hmm.
If I'm the Giants, I know that they don't want to have another year of rebuilding where they just took Barkley. You still have a lot of young talent on that team that has good firepower, but I personally wouldn't be taking Haskins and reaching that highly for him. I don't even like Drew Lock as a top 10 pick, and he's my quarterback too. I think he should be going in that, 20 to 30 range. I don't even want to see him in a top 10. And then all the Daniel Jones comparisons, that's a 5th round player to me. I
He's
I, I
jumped up
get
as a
he's a
first round
smart
stock
guy.
already.
Hey, he's a smart quarterback. Don't get me wrong, but he doesn't have any of the physical traits that you want in a guy other than height. And it's nothing against him. I'm sure he's a great person, but there's no way if I was a general manager that I would be investing a 1st round pick into, Jones, especially, and, Haskins and guys like that. I would much rather take a shot in the 5th round on like Tyree Jackson instead. I think he's the majority of the same player as Haskins, except he went to a smaller school and people don't know who he is.
Well, the interesting thing to me is, and now that they've seen it work with Kansas City, I'll be interested to see how many teams take that approach where, like New York could do that, where you have your guy, even though he's terrible in Eli Manning, you could sit a rookie behind him for a year and then let him take over. I mean, that would help this draft class
It
exponentially.
would.
The top half. You know,
It,
but what do you think about that? Do you think that's a good approach for a lot of these teams, or do you think they should just pass and look for a better talent at the top end of the first round?
so at the top of the 1st round, I would pass. For some of the teams that are in the middle of the pack, like Miami, I might. If I'm Miami and someone like, I don't like Dwayne Haskins, but if Haskins is sitting there for me and they don't have to move up, if he's sitting there at that, 11, 12-ish range, that's where I start to think about it. I think any team that's going to, even with Kyler, I think any team that takes a quarterback in the top 5 or 6 picks this year they're really reaching for something. They're really hoping that they're going to, get lightning in a bottle. But there's no players that are between size, athleticism, built well enough that I would feel comfortable taking in the 1st round. I mean, like I said, maybe some of those guys in like towards the middle to end of the first if you want to develop them for a year. But I don't like the idea with any of these teams taking them and starting them day one. I didn't like it with Lamar Jackson, and I was proven wrong during the regular season. But the second that they ended up playing in the postseason, we saw what Lamar looked like when he got a second look at the same team in the Chargers. They didn't have enough of a game plan ready. I personally, if I'm one of
Yeah, I think we lost Colin already. All right, hold on, folks. It looks like we lost Colin. Let me see if I can get him back here. There he is.
All right, I'm back. Whew. I was wondering where I was.
That's all right. That's all
I
right.
have
You were
no.
talking to Lamar Jackson. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah. Anyway, so we saw what happened with Lamar when he got a second view of a team with the Chargers, and the Chargers knew exactly how to defend him with the second time coming around because they hadn't been able to really change up that offense much. I feel like that's going to happen with any of these rookie quarterbacks. If the Giants somehow make it as the number 6 seed, with Haskins taking over. It's nothing against Haskins. I just don't think that that's going to be the smartest decision on their part. I think what I would do is, if they can, move back a little bit, take a guy that's going to help you out, maybe, Mac at the end of the 1st round, something of that sort. Let another team come up, overpay for someone, and then that's where next year you can do the exact same thing the Chiefs did for Mahomes. Give up a good amount of future assets and go get the guy that you think will fit well for your system next season.
Right. So what about? I mean, there's a couple of other guys that I've heard a lot of people talk about, but I've started hearing a little bit of chatter on. Brett Rippon, Jordan Ta'amu, guys like that. I mean, what are your take on some of these other quarterbacks that you're hearing a little bit about, but not a lot?
See, there's a couple guys this year that I like as those, dart throws between rounds 4 or later. I got nothing against Ryfin. I think he could be a adequate starter, I guess is the best way to put it, if he sits for a season in the right situation. I think for someone like him, the best thing he could do is probably sit for a year, maybe in Green Bay, maybe he'd be a career backup, or if Rodgers goes down again, he can fill in for a couple games. I think there's a couple guys in this draft that will be solid backup quarterbacks. They'll be safe plays for years to come, but they're not going to be able to really rein in a starting team themselves. I think the only guy in that late round that has a chance is Tyree Jackson, but he's going to need to sit. There's no way you can start him day one. He's going to need probably an entire season, if not two, to really learn, the NFL game scheme because he has a fire of an arm. He can run around, but he doesn't have the, NFL makeup right now as far as mentally. They've run very, very simple offenses with Buffalo. I think he is my favorite mid to late round sleeper quarterback, I guess is the best way to put it, for this draft class. And I think he's probably going to go in like the fourth round, would be my guess. He's going to go in that Mason Rudolph sort of territory of last year.
So he fits on a team. I mean, if you're trying to project a team, what kind of team does he fit on? Does he fit on a team like Pittsburgh, who's going to be throwing a lot, or what are you thinking there?
So I think that if GMs look at what he's been able to do, the smartest thing that you can do either is put him in a very conservative offense, or you go and run almost an air raid style offense with him. They can try to do one of the old Shanahan offenses with the Broncos, something of similar of that sort, or they can roll with a very conservative approach where I actually think one of the teams that might be in on Jackson would be like the Patriots in end of round 3, round 4ish, because they have the compensatory third round pick. That wouldn't surprise me if that's going to be their guy to go. Either that or a Will Greer, one of these guys that has the cannon arm and a little bit of mobility in the pocket, but as of right now, wouldn't be able to process an NFL offense. I think there's a couple teams out there with older guys that if they don't want to spend that first round pick on a player, this might be the year to actually get a mid tier guy and invest a year or so in them just to get them up to speed by the time they're ready to take over.
Interesting. I like it. And because of the way that the difference between college and the pro game, I would love to see guys sit more often. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you really
Exactly.
should have a system built like that. I mean, because you see it in a lot of other positions. You see it in the running backs or receivers, on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, why not at the quarterback position? Draft some of these guys that maybe have the measurables, but just don't have it together and need some time to get seasoned. So that's a great take on that. What's
Yep, and it happens, tight
oh, go
end and cornerback all the time.
hmm Well, and it has to. I mean, both those positions, you know,
Hmm.
tight ends, you need to be an athletic freak, but it tends to take 3 years to get yourself up to speed. Cornerback, I mean, that could be even
Right.
longer. I mean, you're seeing guys taken in the first round take 3 to 4 years to really start producing, and that's if they make it that far. I mean, talking about the Giants,
Exactly.
look at Eli Apple getting shipped to New Orleans, and he was just a first rounder a few years ago.
I know, and he was actually pretty successful once he hit New Orleans and changed to a scheme that fit his strengths and weaknesses a lot better too.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, the Giants just, I mean, they're a dumpster fire right now.
They really are. They have some really exciting offensive pieces, but that defense still, I mean, it took a step forward this year, but that really isn't saying much compared to how bad they were in 2017.
Well, and they were selling too. As a Lions guy, I was happy that we got Damon Harrison for a fifth. I mean, the guy is just a monster run stopper, but that is hurting them too.
And you got to remember that Landon Collins, probably the best safety in the NFL, except maybe Keanu Neal. He's more likely than not leaving New York this year too.
Yeah, and it sounds like from what I've been reading, they're not going to tag him. So that's
Mhm.
interesting. One of the top young safeties in the league is going to wind up getting the free agent market. It's amazing.
Yeah, I have no idea why, of all the players on that team, why that's the guy they've decided not to pay. But it's as a Patriots fan, I'm okay with watching the Giants, in a little bit of extra turmoil.
Because they stole one of those Super Bowls from you. Eh?
Two,
Oh yeah, they did get to. Yep, you're right.
two. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh well.
That's funny. Yeah, what can you do?
Yeah,
What can you do? Although I got to fix my title.
it's too
Thanks,
late
Rick,
now.
for pointing that out. That I'm. Looks like we got two Collins in the room.
Ooh,
You're such a big deal that we had to put you on here twice.
I know, right? Look at me.
So while I'm doing that, how about you talk about some of these running backs? I mean, obviously everybody's been hearing about Josh Jacobs, but what are some other guys that you're interested in?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting running back class because I don't think that we really have any of those well put together, full on running backs. I think Jacobs is probably the closest thing to an all around player, but we still haven't seen that much of Josh Jacobs. So it's from what we saw, it's almost projecting what we're going to see. One of the guys that we've seen the most of, Bryce Love, who I really enjoy Bryce Love, tore his ACL while working out, so now we don't know where he's going to go. David Montgomery, I don't understand that love for him. He's a slower guy. He reminds me of Samaje Perine. Still, I can't understand where this Montgomery love's coming from. It has started to die down a little bit, which I'm happy to see. Damian Harris, another big guy, strong player, reminds me of Alex Collins. He could be productive, but it's going to depend on where he goes. He's not going to be a workhorse guy. There isn't a pure, one running back in this class that I think is going to be a top 25 guy, except maybe Jacobs if he goes to the right scenario. I think you're going to see a lot of really strong, somewhere in that, RB30 range. I think we're going to see a lot of good RB3s in this, draft class. But again, 2020 has a much stronger offensive skill set position. I think the receivers this year are really the strength of this draft, wide receivers and tight ends, and then along the lines. If you're looking for a quarterback or running back in this class, whether you're an NFL team or just a dynasty owner, it's going to be a little bit of a shot in the dark.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue that. Bryce Love is a guy that I want to stash. I'm hoping that the injury pushes it to the point where you can put him on your taxi squad. 'Cause that's where I want to let him sit because he is so dynamic, and this injury isn't going to keep him down. I mean, it may, it may hurt him a little bit, but I think in the
We'll
long
see.
run he'll wind up looking good.
We'll see. I loved him, but this past year at Stanford, I lost a lot of the hype that I had for him. He
Mm-hmm.
was, I mean, we know that he was playing injured, but he was playing injured in 2017 and was a monster. He looked like a shell of himself this year. So I was really thinking that he needed to impress at the combine this year to
Yeah.
be able to his draft stock. And then we got the report a couple months ago that he has a lightly torn ACL. He can't do anything at the combine. He has apparently had interviews today with, I believe it was the Eagles and the Dolphins, I want to say. I saw a report that, if he goes to Philly, if they use him almost like the Corey Clement role, they can cut Clement, they don't have to pay him a lot, and they can pair him with Ajayi if they bring Ajayi back. I think that's a perfect fit for him. I don't know if that's where he's going to go. If he goes to Miami, I don't really get that with Kenyon Drake. They're very similar players.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's the two teams that apparently what I saw that he had interviews with. One of them I love the scenario. One of them I'm really confused about. So I'm not sure how it is that offensive coordinators and head coaches and GMs even are really thinking about how they want to use him, unless a team like Miami wants to bring him in mainly to be a special teams guy, and he's going to be a round six player.
Well, and I'll be interested to see, because you brought up a team like Miami. Miami with changing the head coach, changing the systems. I mean, how did they fit into it? So, most people would just
No
say,
idea.
okay, we're going to bring New England's system down, but I don't know that that's the case. I mean, because you see it with like Detroit, they took
Mhm.
Patricia. They don't have New England's scheme, and it looks completely, well, I wouldn't say completely different, but it looks significantly different. So is
It does.
Miami going to do the same thing? Does Kenyon Drake fit? Are they going to go a different direction? I mean, that changes up some of these running back values. If a team like Miami, who could probably use a nice compliment, if they don't like Balaj and Drake, that
Mhm.
changes things quite a bit.
And that's, I think, the idea of Love going to Miami is much more of an indictment on Balaj than anything. Because we've seen they don't plan on bringing back Gore. He might be retiring because of his age. I don't think that they like Balaj because if they really did, I mean, we know they weren't going for a playoff push towards the end of last year, and Frank Gore wasn't 100%. They could have been giving him more carries, but he didn't really see the field that much. I think that's mainly about that they were not impressed with what they saw last year, and they didn't spend a high pick on him. Remember that.
Mm-hmm.
They could very easily put him on a practice squad or see, what other team might give them, a seventh round pick for him.
Yeah. And he's got a lot of tools that he could be in the right place. He could turn out to be a really nice compliment to somebody.
Right. The problem with him as a prospect was never about the physical ability. We knew that he has everything physically that he can put together. It was kind of the mental thing. Ironically enough, Miami took the exact same player a couple years ago in the first round, Devontae Parker, who's still done nothing in that team as well. It might be, I'm going to just take a guess that it's probably more of a character thing, not for him, but in that locker room.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't really had much success. They've been saying apparently they're moving on from Tannehill. I think that they might be trying to change over the entire locker room identity, which is why they brought in Flores, who's a very organized guy who's apparently phenomenal with the players. The players in New England loved him. I think that's maybe what they're doing. They're bringing in a player-friendly coach, seeing exactly what they can work with from there, and then build morale into wins.
Yeah, well, can't argue that. It makes sense, and I'm seeing it in Detroit. When Patricia first got there, people were worried about players checking out on him because even during training camp he was working them hard. Well, to have that winning attitude, I mean, that's the kind of work they put in New England. I mean, that's just the way it is. So Miami's going to have a lot of those growing pains the same way. And I think, a lot of these rookie running backs, I can think of a few that I would love to see go down there that I think could have some value. A guy like Elijah Holyfield from Georgia. He's never really produced well, and he's not been. I expected better. I think he was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school, and he was a name a couple years ago. Devy people were loving on, but he just never really panned out. He's a guy that I think a team could take and mold into something of value because he's got a lot of intangibles that I think are going to play into his favor down the road if he gets in the right spot, though.
I agree. There's a lot of guys that in this class, depending on where they land, I could absolutely love them. But if they don't end up in a good scheme fit, almost in like my rankings, they're going to take an absolute nosedive.
Yeah.
This is just one of those. Yeah, there's not any of these players that, no matter where they go, they're going to be phenomenal. Like we've had a couple players over the years, where Zeke, we just knew no matter where he went, if he was going to go into a run-heavy offense, he was going to succeed. And we don't have any players kind of like that. Like I said, Jacobs is probably the closest thing, which is where he's getting a lot of hype. Because he can do a little bit of everything, but I don't think that he's this, savior of the running backs, where all of a sudden I'm seeing that people are saying, oh, he might be worth the 102 in rookie drafts. And I'm like, you guys can take him there if you want. I mean, I have 5 wide receivers that I would take over any of the running backs this year. And, and maybe a couple tight ends, even in non-super flex. I might not be taking Jacobs until like 107, 108, even if I had a bad need at running back, just because of, the volatility of that position and just the depth of it this year.
Well, and the thing I've been pushing to guys that are talking to me about the running back need in this draft is hey, you know what? Get the best player available, wide receiver, tight end, whatever it is. Wait till next year.
Right.
Unless the guy falls to you later in the first or early in the second, I mean, don't reach. That's the thing that kills dynasties every year is when you're reaching for guys to fill a need.
Yep. Absolutely. It's I've even suggested to people who are in that late half of round 1, see if you can trade down to like a second round pick, give back a 1 or 2 roster fodder players and get a 2020 first. Yeah. You should be trying to get a lot of those 2020 first, especially in Superflex leagues, because even an end of the first round pick next year, that would, depending on who's there, they might be about like the 103 this year at like 110 next season.
Well, yeah, with the amount of quarterbacks potentially that'll be in that draft, I mean, that's really going to kind of spice things up in the Superflex drafts next year.
Yep. Absolutely.
So I want to get your opinion, seeing as the combine isn't starting truly yet. Who's going to run the fastest 40 time in your mind?
So there's a couple guys I'm really excited to see what Paris Campbell can do. I think Paris Campbell has
Ohio State receiver
being that is a guy who can absolutely zoom down the field if he's just running in a straight line. His streak routes this past season, there were a couple that, Haskins has a cannon of an arm. There were a couple that Campbell was running a streak, and he would literally overrun the throw just
Mhm.
because his whole thing, they were basically telling him, run straight, and, Dwayne will throw the ball to you. And he literally outran a couple throws even when he was completely open. Now, that might be a little bit of bad route running too, but that's just his speed. He, I would be shocked if he does any less than like a 3.8 or a fourth. Wow,
4.38. I knew
fourth.
what you meant. So he's faster than Hollywood Brown, you think?
Well,
'Cause that was the
Hollywood,
guy that first came to my mind when the question came across our Twitch page. I mean, he's the guy that I always kept seeing on tape, and I'm like, wow, this dude's fast.
he's really fast, but I think that although he's fast, I think he's the quickest player, if that makes sense. I
Mm-hmm.
think he's the quickest on slant routes and stuff of that digs. He's phenomenal with the release between the receivers. I think if we're doing just straight line speed, I'm thinking that's gonna be Paris Campbell, man.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Brown's got the best body control in the draft. I mean, the guy seems to really, like you
Probably.
said on Diggs, the dude just has it all together. And he's a guy that I'm excited about. I mean, there's a lot of receivers I'm excited about. I mean, the top half of the receiver class just looks really nice.
Yeah.
And
See,
even a
my
guy that I
my
hadn't thought about was Hakeem Butler. I posted in our Facebook group that he's been working with Calvin Johnson, but the dude's got a very similar body type. Now he comes from a location that isn't really big on receivers. So, what do you think
right.
about guys like that? The Hakeem Butlers and some of those lower down the
So
board guys.
so Butler is a guy that I've seen the Calvin Johnson stuff. The player that I actually kind of compare him to is Kenny Galladay. I'm not a huge Butler lover, but I think for the people that really loved Galladay as a rookie, and I was wrong about him then because he's succeeded, better than I thought he would have. But his hype is starting to get insane with Galladay. I think Butler is a very similar player. They high point the ball well. They're pretty good with straight line speed. Decent route running, but nothing spectacular. But for their size, it's above average at their size. I think he's probably the best like young player comp I can think of. My guy, and I've been this way for a couple of years, and I probably will go down on this ship if anything happens, is Debo Samuel. Give me Debo, man. That is a kid who has done everything he can to prove himself. He has one hell of a story as to how it is that he's, got to the point that he's at now. You know, a phenomenal special teams returner. He is a little brittle, which is going to be an issue, which is where he's, I have him about my 106, but I'd feel confident taking him there. He's, one of the better route runners in this class, really strong hands. He takes big hits, and he is fast, he's quick. He's a little bit of everything. He's, for me, one of the most well-rounded players, and his numbers, at South Carolina this year, I don't think reflect his ability. He's playing across from Edwards, who's a good, but not phenomenal big receiver who's going to be in next year's class. His quarterback Bentley was terrible, and they didn't run a very inventive offense for what his abilities are. Every year there's a couple of these guys that, they have good numbers but not exceptional numbers in college. But when they get to the next level, they really, excel and exceed expectations just because of their actual play style fits better in the NFL game than the college game. And
Mm-hmm.
Debo's one of these guys that I'm gonna go down on that ship. That he is my guy. I'm marking down as I'm the Debo guy.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I can't argue. There's so many receivers that I love in this class. The only issue
Yeah,
I ever really saw with Debo was it seemed like he had trouble adjusting to the ball. Like, if he threw to a
on
certain
jump
spot, he would
balls.
go up and get it. But yeah, I mean, that was my only concern with him is that. And the
Yeah.
brittleness scares me, but we've seen a lot of receivers that can overcome that.
Right. And the way I see him is I think if a team drafts him and uses him in a very similar Juju role, I
Mm.
think that's where he's going to succeed. I don't want him to be taken by a team expecting him to be the X. Let him be the wide receiver who runs into the slot on about 30 to 50% of his routes. I think that's where he's going to succeed. If he has another guy who's going to be able to let off some of the pressure, and he's that second option, like 1B to 1A, that's where I think he's going to succeed. If he's playing one on one on the outside every single snap, I think that's where he's going to have some serious trouble.
Yeah.
It's kind of similar problems that I have with AJ Brown, where people are really loving AJ Brown, but Brown has succeeded in the slot. When, Metcalf got hurt this past year, we saw him move to the outside, but DeMarcus Lodge was the guy who looked a lot better on the outside than AJ Brown.
Hmm.
That's my biggest reservation with that player is that, everyone's saying, oh, originally people had him, as a top 10 overall player in this draft class, and all of a sudden now he's in like the second round territory, which is more what I've been saying for a while. He's a really good slot receiver who can play outside sometimes. I'm really nervous if a team like Oakland takes him at the end of the first round expecting this big play X receiver, where he really should be more of a slot guy that can move outside for streak routes.
Yeah, I would want to see him somewhere, where he can focus on the slot. Put him in a team like, New Orleans, or one of these teams that utilizes three receivers pretty regularly but doesn't have a
Exactly.
really solid guy. So,
Yep. New Orleans would be an absolute perfect fit for him, where Thomas is playing on the outside. He can be that Y, move into the slot for a little bit. That might be the ideal scenario actually for AJ.
yeah, yeah. So what about the Ohio State guys? So we got McLaren, we got Paris Campbell, who you talked about already. Are these guys? Can they transition at all? Because Ohio State doesn't tend to produce very good receivers anymore. It feels like.
So I have a couple guys that I like. Campbell is my favorite of that class. McCarron, I think, is just going to be a really fast player. He might be another one of those for the top 40 times. His combine
Devin
results
Smith.
are really going to help him. I think he's like a fourth to fifth round talent right now. That could be at late second to mid third, depending on his combine performance. I think some team is going to take Paris Campbell between late round one to mid round two. I might not agree with that. I like the player a lot, and I have him on a lot of my Devy teams, but I think that might be a little bit of a reach for him.
Mhm.
But it wouldn't surprise me if a team sees what he can do, where he's kind of like Debo. He can do a little bit of everything. He's a little bit faster, and he has a little bit less, wear on the tires, essentially. But I don't see that it factor with him as much as I do with Debo. Campbell is a solid prospect. Don't get me wrong. I think he could be, trying to think. He, at best, I think his top potential is he could be T.Y. Hilton, which
Hmm.
that's a great ceiling to have. But I think that his floor is a lot lower than a player like Debo. He's a high ceiling, low floor sort of prospect. If you can get him at the back half of the first round, top second round in your rookie draft, I like him there a lot though.
My worry is these guys, turn out to be more like, like Devin Smith, the guy that went to the Jets a few years back. I mean, had a ton of talent, couldn't put it together, and now nobody knows about him. That's my concern with any of these receivers that have come through Ohio State in the last 7 years easily.
Right.
But Paris Campbell, if any of them are going to break the mold, it's going to be him. I mean, he's got all the
Exactly.
intangibles. So
Yeah,
another guy that
I've been
sorry,
burned
go
by
ahead.
Jets receivers. Our Darius Stewart killed me on every single team that I took him.
Yeah, I mean the Jets were. I mean the Jets still are a dumpster fire. So I mean it's
Right.
those guys came in at the wrong time. Just like was it Chad
Yep.
Hansen? The other guy they took.
Yep.
Everybody loved
Yep.
either one of them. None of them panned out, and
Hmm.
that's the
Yeah.
unfortunate
Every
breaks.
single year, there's one or two.
Just so happened the Jets took two of the two.
Yep. Yep.
So a guy people have been talking about come Senior Bowl and things like that is that Andy Isabella. What do you make of this kid?
I've I've actually, as someone who actually has a lot of friends that go to UMass, and I've gone to UMass games, he's actually been someone that I've been, basically pounding the table for a solid like year and a half. I like Andy Isabella a lot. Most people, I kept saying that there's actually an NFL level receiver coming out of UMass, and I was told I was insane. Um, he is a pretty solid overall player, but he is if I'm an NFL GM, he's a slot specialist. He is a late third round at the highest to like early fifth round pick that I think you can really rely on to be a slightly better version of like Adam Humphries. I think if you're taking him expecting this Wes Welker like player, I
Edelman,
think
yeah.
that's probably a little bit too much, or if you're expecting Julian Edelman, I think that's a little too much. But I think he could be a really solid wide receiver 3 for your team for the next 5-6 years.
Well, I hear he's a hard worker. I mean, I've only watched
Yes.
some of his tape, but I hear that dude works harder than anybody else on the field.
Yep. Yeah, and that's the thing. There's a lot of those guys that are slot receivers that they don't have the size, but they have the skill. And a lot of the guys that are specifically slot receivers coming out of college usually have, longer careers than some of these more athletic big guys, just because they have had to work harder through, even through high school, especially through college, to get their name out there just because of their size. Where I think that they're typically a, lower ceiling in general, but much higher floor players. He's one of those guys. If I can get him at any point in the second round in rookie drafts, I'm thrilled.
That's interesting. Very interesting.
Yep.
So
I think I have him penciled at 110 for me right now.
Oh, really?
Yep.
I can't argue
he's
that.
at-
I mean, if he
Yeah,
pans out
it's
and
a
goes to the
back
right place.
first.
Yeah.
Yep. Back out. I have him before N'Keal Harry. I can tell you that.
Man, he is such a. He's a guy that when I watch him, I want to love him. I mean, he looks like he should be amazing, but every time I watch him, I'm like, could be better. I mean, what do you make of him?
He's the most polarizing prospect in this entire draft class, I think, where people are, I think he and Kyler Murray are probably the two most polarizing. A lot of people are saying that they don't want Murray because of his size. The thing that scares me about N'Keal Harry is, he went to, a Pac-Sun offense. He put up big numbers, but the team never really won. And it's not even just that. His speed really scares me. The player that I think he reminds me the most of the past couple of years, if you remember coming out of Texas A&M, what Ricky Seals-Jones was. There was a lot of hype for Ricky Seals-Jones. Big guy, can do everything, phenomenal, high point, can bully people around. I don't think that he runs a 40 time above 4.63. And I think that is when his stock is going to plummet. I have him as like a mid-second, late second round rookie pick. I understand where people love him. If you watch just highlight reels, he's probably the most entertaining player in this entire draft class. There's no doubt about that. His highlight plays are crazy, but he's playing against guys who are, future plumbers. They're not going to be NFL talents on almost all the games that he's playing in. And if you really watch him running streak routes, he is not fast. He's slow in and out of breaks. He gets good release on the corners, but that's mainly through just his sheer strength and size. If he was a tight end, I would be over the moon for this player. But with where he's expected to be drafted in like the second round of the NFL draft, people are really starting to buy into it. That is not someone that I'm going to be getting close to. I like what I've seen as far as tight end goes. As far as a wide receiver on the outside, that scares the hell out of me. He reminds me of an actually even slower version of Kelvin Benjamin.
That was the name that I kept thinking about as I'd watch him.
Yep.
But a lot of the places I hear people putting him is a team like Indianapolis. Well, they've already got that in Eric Ebron, and he's more athletic.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't make sense to me.
I've seen
Indy's got Deion Kane. They've got Zach Pascal. I mean, they've got these guys that have better athletic measurables than I'm sure Harry will have. The only thing Harry would have over some of these other guys is just pure size, but I don't know that really does much. How do you put him on the field when you've got Jack Doyle and Eric Ebron that are big versions of him as already?
Right. And one of the teams I've seen also linked to him is the Cowboys. And I don't understand that one at all. Like, I get where people are saying it's the whole, he'd fit in perfectly with Dak. I'm like, but I don't get how that's going to help. They need another guy to be able to, take some of the pressure off of Amari Cooper. N'Keal Harry is not the sort of player in my mind that's going to do that. He's kind of a better version of Jason Witten, who just officially announced he's coming back. He's probably a little bit faster than Jason Witten at this point in his career. I'll give him that. But I don't like the idea of Harry outside in Dallas. There's very few spots that I think that he could succeed in where he might be worth a first-round pick to me.
Well, and with a team like Dallas, I mean, they put so much in Michael Gallup last year. Cole Beasley will probably leave. Michael Gallup isn't much of a slot guy. He's better on the outside than on the inside. I mean, it's just that doesn't make any sense. And personally, I want to thank the Cowboys for getting Jason Witten out of the Monday night booth. I want him to stop breaking trophies and get off that.
I know that's been bad. I have to say, Romo has actually gotten better. Romo doesn't bother me like he did like week 1, but Witten is. No. I am excited to see Greg Olsen, though. Greg Olsen, I think, would be a phenomenal broadcaster. We learned that Jason Witten might have a lot of personality, but is not a good broadcaster this past year.
Well, and he's a guy that I would probably rather see, like on Sunday morning countdowns and stuff like that, where you can kind of cover up his inability with the other guys around him. Greg Olsen I would be excited about, but the guy doesn't want to retire. I mean, he already told Carolina he wants to play again this year. So it'll be another year of Ian Thomas watching from the sidelines and maybe getting to play when he gets hurt.
That's going to help Ian Thomas.
It will, but at some point you got to get him on the field. He's got to get those reps in game. I mean, it's nice to watch a Hall of Famer like Greg Olsen, but the kid's got to get on the field. The nice thing about the situation now is, Romo's gotten better, but that guy needs to stop moaning into the microphone. I mean, making all these weird noises when he's talking is just it throws me off, and he gets super excited at weird times. And he's better. He's definitely, like you said, he's definitely gotten better, but.
Yeah, he's significantly improved. He's not, as bad as Joe Buck. If you gave me the option of I have to listen to Romo call every single Patriots game or Joe Buck or Chris Collinsworth, I'm taking Tony Romo in a heartbeat, I'll tell you that much.
I won't say that I'd want Joe Buck more than Jason Witten, but it's really close between those two. I mean, and that's the tough thing is that Joe Buck works so hard. I mean, the dude, he can commentary over everything: baseball, NASCAR, football. It's like, man, I appreciate your work ethic and you're giving it your all for every sport, but you got to give me some personality. You got to give me something to work with. I mean, the most monotone delivery I've ever heard, and it's tough because they put him in such a tight spot. He's in all the primetime games, and I'm like, I don't want to hear you.
Oh, absolutely. All the time. That's the problem with Buck. If he was doing, some of the local games, I wouldn't have a problem. It's the fact, like you said, it doesn't matter what sport you're watching, you're going to run into Joe Buck every single weekend. Yeah,
and it's tough. I mean,
it is.
But needless to say, we digress a little bit. I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole because there's some really bad guys out there commentating games. But maybe that's what they need to do. They need to put us on Sunday. Let us do some commentary.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about a lot of the guys at the top end, receiver wise. Is there anybody that we missed that you've been excited about that? Maybe not banging the table for, but guys that you want to add to your team that could have potential 2-3 years down the road?
I mean, obviously, there's a couple top of the name guys, or top of the draft guys we haven't really discussed too much, in DK Metcalf. And my 101 as of right now, Kelvin Harmon. Harmon is a guy that I absolutely love. He reminds me of a smaller Julio Jones. And I usually get yelled at for the Julio Jones comparison because then people go, well, part of Julio's thing is the jump ball. And I agree. If you take away that size and that jump ball, Kelvin Harmon is essentially the same player, but a little bit better at, slant routes, a little bit better at route running, a little bit better in his quickness. He reminds me a lot of Julio, just without that size. He is my 101, and unless he bombs the combine or goes to somewhere like Jacksonville, I find it very difficult for him to move out of that 101 spot for me.
And he doesn't have the feet of a 90-year-old man like Julio does. I mean, this kid is much more healthy. The thing that I love is that he wins contested catches. I mean, I wouldn't say 100% of the time, but 99% of the time, that guy is really going up there and getting it. And that's what you need in the NFL. I mean, you need to be able to do those types of things because quarterback needs a trust that when he throws it to you, it doesn't matter what's going on, you're going to catch it. I can't say that he's my. It's so hard because there's probably 3 or 4 guys that I could argue up there at the top of the receiver class. So I don't fault anybody for loving Kelvin Harmon or DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf's a guy that I want to see his athletic scores, and I want to see. I'm a big fan of the RAS numbers. I want to see kind of how he stacks up, but I feel like both of them are going to be successful almost in any situation. You know, a team like Jacksonville, because they don't have things figured out at their quarterback position, because no matter how much they say Bortles is their guy right now, I don't believe it. You know,
No, hey, they're right now the Vegas odds to be signing Nick Foles.
dear Lord. Poor Nick Foles. I love him in Philadelphia. Every time he goes anywhere else, he just kind of plummets.
Terrible.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a nightmare as soon as he leaves.
And I don't know if it's him or the system. I mean, it's hard to tell because in Philly, it doesn't matter who the coach is, he's successful. So,
yeah. So I'm actually curious. I want to hear for you, like you said, Harmon's one of the top 4 guys for you. Who's in that like top 4 tier for you?
You know, probably gonna put Debo, and I like Hollywood Brown and I like Riley Ridley, and those are 2 guys that I've been trying to talk myself into putting into that kind of top tier of receiver.
All right, so we actually have 4 of the same top 5 players. My other guy who's in that top 5 is DK Metcalf. The other guys that you just named in the top 4, I think Hollywood is probably a little bit lower down for me. I have him in like that 107, and I have A.J. Brown sitting, I believe, at 106 right now. But he and Hollywood both are completely, you know, depending on where they get drafted, they can move into that like 105 spot. But for the most part, I think you and I have essentially the same exact rookie rankings, and we didn't even discuss this beforehand.
No, I like it off the cuff. It's much better that way. You know,
exactly.
The tough thing for me though is you could, you know, that next tier, there's probably 2 or 3 guys, and then it just drops down with guys that I think have good measurables or intangibles, but didn't produce well. Or I mean, there's just too many question marks. So for me, it's a real top-heavy wide receiver class, and then it kind of gets sketchy real quick. So, you know,
I agree.
Yeah. So, I think one other guy. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, what were you saying?
I was just saying, sorry. I said I'm like even like you said, where there's big teardrops. I mean, wide receiver is by far the deepest position this year still.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like if I'm trying to move into that first round, ideally, if you're not in like a desperate super flex, you know, where you need a quarterback badly, and I can make you the argument for Kyler Murray at like 103-ish. Other than that, I think I personally would prefer to have a pick in that 104 to 106 range, where I can grab a guy like, if I can grab, you know, Riley Ridley, like you said, Hollywood there, depending on where he goes, Debo. You might even be able to get Harmon, depending on who's, you know, in your draft with you. That 4 to 6 range, that's where I want to be this draft class.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a real sweet spot because there are so many guys that could fall there that are going to make your team so much better. You know,
absolutely.
The last receiver I got to talk about, because he's probably got the best name in the entire draft, is Little Jordan Humphrey out of Texas. That dude's name is amazing, and if his birth certificate says that, I want to draft him just because of his name.
I actually like Humphrey. So I'm a big Colin Johnson supporter, and he was a guy that I had in that 105, 106 range until he decided to go back to school. I think he's trying to take advantage of that 2020 doesn't have that strong of a wide receiver class right now. So for him, I'm sure financially it's a smart decision. Kind of makes me sad, though, because I have a lot of those mid-round picks, and I was getting excited for him. But I actually like Lil Jordan. He's a guy that I could see taking. I think he's one of those 2nd to 3rd round rookie pick prospects. Now his hype might pick up, and if it does, phenomenal. I'm gonna stick with that mid-2nd to like early 3rd round range for him. But I like the player. He's actually good with body control, even though he's not exceptionally large. He's pretty good with contested catches, and then all together, he's a well-rounded player. I don't think that you're going to get any, you know, phenomenal, all of a sudden, you know, Michael Thomas sort of stuff from him. But I think you're going to get a solid contributor on your team for the next 4 or 5 years that, you know, you can slot in if in a, you know, where you start 3 wide receiver league. He might be okay as, starting as your wide receiver 3 during bye weeks.
Well, and it's nice because he's not big, but he has a frame to grow into. I mean, the dude's like 6'4", 6'5", exactly. Something like that. So, you know, he could easily, as he matures, add some weight, you know, and he's not slow like some of these other receivers that we've already talked about, the Kelvin Benjamin comp guys. So
Yeah.
I'm intrigued. I mean, his name's awesome, but he's got, I like Texas receivers typically. I tend to give them more of a chance because I've always liked Texas receivers. So he's got a chance, but I think Colin Johnson's a better receiver than he would be. I mean, I'm definitely like him more.
Love Colin Johnson.
And I'm glad he waited because this class is so heavy. Maybe next year it's a little better for him, and he has a chance to be one of those standout guys.
Yeah, I'm thinking that's probably why he went back to school, because everyone expected him to come out this year. And when it was announced that he was going back to school, it was a bit of a surprise, but it wasn't too shocking.
Well, and you got to remember, a lot of the times, these guys go before the draft board and they kind of give them an idea of where they would get drafted at that, whatever point they're asking that question. So, somebody told him that he's probably not going to beat out some of these other guys. So it's smarter to go back.
Yeah.
This isn't like the NBA where you one and done.
Yeah, I'm guessing he was probably told he was a, third round player just because of his size and everything. And he wasn't, one of those, when you watch film, he doesn't step out at you as much as some of the other guys. So I personally think he's a round 2 NFL talent, but we've seen over the years that there have been players that get taken in the first round. They get that the NFL draft expectation that they're going to go in like the 4th and 5th round and they return for another year. I think it's probably what it was with Colin Johnson, where he probably got that as of now expected to be in the 3rd or 4th round range, and he went, well, next year there really isn't that many guys that are going to get taken in the 2nd. Might as well go back for one more year.
Right. Yeah, can't argue that.
Yep.
The more interesting thing in my mind is how many tight ends are going to get drafted in the top 10 of rookie picks this year? Because, man, this tight end class looks really good. What do you think about all these guys? I mean, there's easily 3 or 4.
That's a good question. I'm not sure about how many are going to go in the top 10. I have 2 guys that I would take in the top 10. Which would be Hawkinson and Irv Smith. I'm not as big of a Noah Fant guy as a lot of people, and I know he's almost a lock to go in the first round. I've seen a lot of comps to Evan Engram for him, where he does not remind me of Engram at all.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of more of Irv Smith's sort of thing. I like Fant, but I can already tell you that because of where he's expected to go, I'm not going to own a single share of him. Hawkinson, I think, is the best altogether tight end ready to go. Reminds me a lot of George Kittle, who's a little bit slower, I guess would be the best way to put it. He's not as fast off the line, but is a better blocker as of right now. And coming out of college, if you are a strong blocker at the tight end position, you're going to see reps. And that's one of those things that really has stepped out with a lot of these players. We're getting more athletic tight ends, but the guys who are better blockers, I mean, in Miami, you even know that Durham Smythe even got more work in general than Mike Gesicki, entirely because they can actually trust him in the run game.
Right. Yeah. And that makes a big deal. The thing for me with Hawkinson is that he's already body-wise ready to go. Fant is undersized. I mean, he's 6'4", but I think he weighed in at like in the 230s during the college season. And that's just at the tight end position, you got to add a little more weight. You got to be closer to 250, 245, 250.
Absolutely.
So yeah, he may have, but for Fant, he reminds me, it's almost weird. Like he needs to, get a little faster to be a receiver. I mean, he's so good catching the ball, and he cradles it, and he's got soft hands. I mean, he's got a great receiver skill set, except he's just not fast enough. He's got a great tight end skill set, but he's not big enough. I mean, it's just so, like, where does he fit into it? And I think that'll knock him down in people's minds.
I will see. The hype that he's had for a long time, I think he's going to end up getting taken a little bit earlier than you and I might, hope that he does. I think it's one of those things where there are a lot of people that they do some work with rookie drafts, but a lot of it goes into like highlight plays, and a lot of people watch that sort of stuff. If you're watching just his YouTube highlight plays, he's going to be your tight end 1 in this class. If you're watching full game film and really looking at his body size, that's where I think, he is my tight end 3. Don't get me wrong, and I have him as a early to mid 2nd round pick, but I see him being taken where people are saying, they'll take him at like 105 range, which I think
Wow,
is
way too early.
an astronomical price for him.
Yeah. All right, so before we talk any more tight ends, we got a question we got to get answered.
Let's
Of
do it.
all the rookies, would you take any of these rookies over Saquon?
Does Geis count? Because he missed last season. Because that's the only one I debate. Other than that, no, nope.
All right,
I
that
would,
was a pretty quick decision on your part. I figured you'd think a little more on it.
Yeah, no, I would trade 101 and 102 this year with a small piece for Saquon. I have no problem. I was wrong about Saquon, and part of the reason that I was wrong about him was he caught more balls than I expected him to, and more specifically, he was really the only working part of that Giants offense, where I thought he was going to go down with the rest of that offense.
Mm-hmm.
He proved me wrong. I got no problem admitting that I was wrong about that player. I still might, depending on what I can get, if I could trade Saquon for Geis and a decent piece, I'd probably still do that. But no, in this class, Saquon would be like 101A. Kelvin Harmon would be like 101C. There's a big gap for me between Saquon versus any of the rookies this season. Next year might be a little bit of a different, question, but with this year, nope. Give me Saquon 100%.
All right. There you have it, people. He said Saquon. The struggle I have is that people value. I love Saquon. I don't own any shares of him because I don't ever own the 101. But one of the leagues I was in, I was talking to one of the owners today, and he literally offered 3 first rounders, so one this year, one next year, one the year after, for Saquon, and the owner literally just flat out rejected it, no response, no nothing. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I mean, yeah, I love them, but 3 first round picks and they're all probably in the top 5. I'd take that in a heartbeat.
See, that's one of those things that I understand where you might take that. I think I would probably sit on it, only because we never know with first round picks, unless it's something like if this guy decided to make something like an NBA, protection, like everything has to be top 4 or 5 protected, that would be a very different scenario. Mm-hmm. But if we're going to be doing something where it's, 3 random first round picks, someone can turn around their team with a guy like Saquon, and that first pick might be 105, and then you're getting 108 and 109 the next couple years, and you're going to regret that. If you can get something like a, Kerryon Johnson and a first round pick and a second round pick, I'll do that. But if it's just 3 random first rounders that you don't know for a fact will be like top 6, I'd have to sit on that.
Yeah, I can't argue that. So, in talking about, I'm gonna go back to tight ends because I want to wrap this up soon.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of guys that I like, but as a Michigan guy, I'm interested to see what happens with Zach Gentry. The dude is massive. He's already got the size, the intangibles. I don't know that he produced as well as I was expecting in Michigan, but in a pinch when they needed something to happen, he could make it happen for him. What do you think about a guy like Gentry?
So he's another one of those really interesting players. I like him. I don't love him. I see a lot of problems with his game. He is a big guy, but surprisingly enough, for his size, he doesn't really block exceptionally well, which kind of gets me a little nervous. Like I said, I like the guy. He's a late second, early third round rookie pick to me. Worth taking a shot on there, depending on his landing spot. If he goes to a place like, Minnesota, if he can sit behind like Kyle Rudolph for a year or 2 before that contract expires, then I'd be, pretty interested in him. If he lands in New England, another team that needs another tight end, that would be interesting. But if he goes, we know how Baltimore for some reason just decides to take at least one tight end basically every year or 2. If he goes in the 3rd or 4th round to Baltimore, he's value's dead.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, The thing for me with Baltimore is I'll be interested to see how the change in GM from Ozzie, if that changes their drafting philosophy. Although most of the ownership and leadership is in place, they've got a lot of tight ends. A team like Minnesota, I was interested in Tyler Conklin coming out. A guy from Central Michigan.
Yep.
But like you said, I mean, there's so many good tight ends in this class that I could see guys that we had interested in last year, like a Tyler Conklin, becoming useless because there's just so many good tight ends in this class.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm the sort of guy that usually, especially in tight end premium leagues, I got no problem trading a 4th-round pick for someone like Will Dissly. I got Will Dissly, Troy Fumagalli. I got these guys stashed on every single roster. And with those mid-round rookie picks, now I'm going to be debating, am I going to hold on to these guys for a year, or am I going to maybe move on to another player? It's going to depend on landing spots for like all of these guys for me. Irv Smith is the one that I'm most interested in seeing where he lands. That's the guy that I really want to see who wants to invest in him, because I think he might end up going in the late 1st round, where we haven't really heard a lot of that. Irv Smith in that mid second half of the mid, to like the Steelers, that would not shock me, even though we haven't heard any rumors of that yet.
Mm-hmm. The thing with Smith to me that I want to see how he measures is it felt like he could stretch the field, but I never felt like he was beating anybody. I mean, he seems to have enough speed, but I want to see how he measures out and see his play speed just didn't seem very fast, and that is a concern to me, the way that tight ends are used these days.
Yeah, I agree. He's, like I said, I think he's similar to Evan Ingram. He's really quick, which is kind of his strength right now, where he might not have that straight line speed, but a lot of guys at the tight end position don't.
Yeah.
And that's where I would feel pretty confident with him going, depending on where he's taken. I have no problem right now if you had to draft early, because I've seen rookie drafts happen like the past weekend or two. I don't know why people do it before the NFL draft, but if you're drafting in the next week or so, he's one of those guys in that 107, 108 range I'd feel pretty confident in taking, because unless he lands where there's already another good young tight end, I'm probably going to, feel pretty decent about his landing spot.
So I keep hearing you talk about your 105, 106, 107. Give me your top 12 players right now for the guys that are listening that have a draft tomorrow. What are your top 12? So put it on record who your guys are.
Okay, this is really tough for me, because to me that depending on your team need, between 106 to like 204 can be completely changed. That's the thing. Are we doing super flex ranks?
Oh, yeah, why not? People love super flex.
All right.
Well, I'll give you an easy one.
Right.
Go super flex.
All right. So if we're doing super flex, it goes in order. Harmon is 101 for me right now. I have DK as my tentative 102. I'm just going to say, if you're quarterback needy, that's where I can see you make the 103 argument for Kyler Murray. I might not love it, but I can get it. Riley Ridley, 104. 105, Deebo Samuel. 106, A.J. Brown. 107, T.J. Hawkinson. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Because as soon as you hit 107, after that tier, that's where I go, woo. 108 would be Jacobs for me right now. Don't love it, but I'm mildly confident in that. 109. This is the thing. I have a couple guys on my mind. I'll say as of right now, I'll pencil in Irv Smith. It's pretty close, but I'll pencil in Irv Smith 109. 110 is roughly where I have Andy Isabella. 111, Hakeem Butler. And 112, I'm going to go with Noah Fant, just because I believe he'll go to a scenario where a team will know what to do with him.
Can't argue that. I mean, that's a solid top 12. I think they all make sense. The interesting thing to me is that, the combine is going to really switch things up and really start to give better perspective on things. And I would encourage anybody that's watching, make sure that you check out the coverage of the combine and listen to what you're hearing, because even as the week started, you're hearing a lot of chatter from the NFL guys. You're hearing people that they're interested in. You're hearing about potential moves of guys that are going to be moved here in free agency. I mean, you're starting to hear a lot of those things. So I would encourage any of the people watching to make sure you keep yourself connected to what's going on this weekend. It's a big next 4, 5, 6 days of information that you're going to get and you're going to see. So keep locked in here. You're going to see guys in our Discord and in our Facebook group talking about the stuff they're hearing, talking about the stuff they're seeing. Rick and I are going to try to do some things and make sure we're keeping you all on top of that. But, for anybody who's watching, make sure you check out what Colin's saying. He's always posting. I love seeing Colin post in the Discord because that dude, he is the man when it comes to posting. You do. And, so
I try to start some controversial opinions to see if everyone else is along with it. Just like years ago when I had Mike Williams over Corey Davis, I was considered crazy. Right now, it's kind of like a 50-50 split depending on the owner.
Well, but Mike Williams is getting more touchdowns, crazy. So
yeah, give me 2 years, and usually what I said 2 years later, a lot of it is at least pretty close.
Yeah, and you start to see those trends over the years. I've been doing Dynasty football for what feels like forever, and when you see those trends, I mean, you can start to see the colleges that are really producing, running backs, receivers, quarterbacks, tight ends, across the board, and that tends to change a little as the coaches and whatnot. But you see that, and I think this year there's a lot of talent across the board, and people are starting to see that. You were hearing a lot of people bash this class last year, especially early on in the season and throughout the season. But as I watch the college games and I'm checking out, I'm like, I'm not necessarily seeing as huge a drop off. I mean, yes, we may not have the top end talent at quarterback like we had in the last few years, or running back, but you still have some quality guys. And the receiver class is great. The tight end class is great. I mean, this is going to be a fun draft. This is going to be a fun year. There's going to be a lot of good guys to draft, and and I think that there's just so much that's going to come from this class that's going to help people's dynasties.
All right, so before we sign off, I got one question for you. Who's the guy that, depending on his whatever position, depending on his combine results, could move him from outside of your top 12 players to like potentially top 5?
Probably AJ Brown, just because I want to love him. I've not seen it yet, so it's hard for me to believe that he's really going to break into the first round in my mind. I'm with you on the fact that he's probably a second round guy, but I want him to be a first round guy. Every time I watch him, I'm like, I want this guy to be successful. People have been talking him up for so long. So probably him. I would have said Bryce Love if he was going to be able to compete. He's the guy that I want in every draft I can get him in, because I've loved him for years now. I'm not saying he's the next great running back, but he just has so much potential that he's a guy I want to get. Those are two guys that I want to see be successful. Who knows if they will be? I'm not a scout, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn, so I may know what I'm talking about.
See, my guy is my current running back too, who I have is a pretty close guy to Jacobs, where like I could see the argument of him moving to like 107, 108 round, 108ish for me, which is Darrell Henderson out of Memphis. I love what I've seen on tape. His size scares me. If he measures in a little bit bigger than I expect him to, and his three cone is a high speed on the three cone, I could see him move into that 107, 108 spot for me.
Yeah, because we're going to be so running back needy, and people will reach, see it every year. He's a guy that people will reach for because they'll see the size and they'll want to compare him to, your Darren Sproles or some of these smaller running backs. I don't know what to expect of him. I want to see him catch more. I want to see better hands. He's a guy that they're not going to want to run in between the tackles. So I need to see those scores of the combine. You're right. I mean, he could jump into the first round based on his measurables.
Yeah, Henderson's a guy that I think he could actually be a much better version of Corey Clement, who can actually run between the tackles. So we'll see. He could be. For me, that could he could very easily be my number one riser before the end of this draft process.
Yeah, we'll see. I definitely want to see some running backs climb up, because I want to see the first round get a little bit more muddy for people and make them have to work harder. But we'll
Absolutely.
see. We'll see. So, well, thank you, Colin. I'm glad that you jumped on here. I'm hoping that we can do some more of these as the weeks go on, post combine, and get your idea
Oh,
and get your feel of things. So, keep
ab-
posting in Discord. For those of you that are watching, make sure you jump on Discord in the Twitch chat. We posted the link. Jump on. We talk fantasy football. We talk hockey. We talk baseball. There's guys talking NASCAR. There's all sorts of different fantasy. We talk music. We talk games. All of it. Check our
we
Facebook
got
group
everything.
out. Oh man, we got everything. If you love '90s alternative music, me and Rick will probably be talking about it in the Discord. So
Absolutely.
thank you guys again for checking us out. Check us out here every Thursday. We're gonna have more content going now that we're getting things moving. Now that we're getting all the technical difficulties worked out. Make sure you check out everything we got going. Start with the Discord, hit the Facebook, catch us here on Twitch every Thursday night. I'll be trying to add some more content as we go, more than just Thursday night. So keep it locked here, and we'll see you guys later.
Thank you very much, guys.